So, welcome to Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live. This is my live Q&A show where I take questions from my viewers that are posted during the week and give more detailed answers. And after I'm done with that, I'll take some live questions from my viewers who are watching. Let me know if you can see and hear me here before I get started. I just want to make sure that everyone can see and hear me. This still says not active. Did I do something wrong here? Should be going, right? Oh, there we go. Okay. Stream is active. And so before I get started, I wanted to play a kind of a bonus clip for everyone. I noticed Liberal Viewer Sunday Live clip roundup is more popular than Liberal Viewer Wednesday. And I actually enjoy it more because I like to play the clips and then talk and play the clips and have like breaks, and I don't like it being just 30 minutes all me. So it's one reason I may be phasing out the Liberal Viewer Wednesday live show, or maybe making it less than a weekly occurrence. But I saw this clip yesterday on CNN coverage of the tornado in Oklahoma. I've seen a lot of coverage of that on all the stations. It's been a big story. It's pretty much dominated what's on cable news. I mean, there's been other news, but there's some horrible stories and there's some heartwarming stories, and they've been interviewing a lot of people in front of the rubble. And I saw this interesting CNN interview from Wolf Blitzer, of one of the tornado survivors, yesterday, that was kind of the antidote to some of what I've been watching on Fox News, as I'll discuss after I show the clip here.
We're happy you're here. You guys did a great job.
Yeah.
And I guess you got to thank the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Do you thank the Lord for that split-second decision?
I'm actually an atheist.
Oh, you are? All right, don't thank the Lord. But you made the right call.
Yeah. We are here, and you know, I don't blame anybody for thanking the Lord.
Of course not.
So.
Hey.
So that was a great clip there. For you know, a lot of my viewers are atheists, come from the YouTube atheist community, and I really enjoyed that clip, especially because I've been watching a lot of Fox News, as always, and they've been doing a lot of tornado coverage where they seem to pick out clips of people saying, I was saved from the tornado by God. You know, I prayed to God and I was saved. And I know Fox News picks out those clips to reinforce their viewers' perceptions that if you pray to God, God's going to save you. And whenever I see those, I always think, well, I wonder if any of those people who are dead now were also praying to God, and they never really investigate that aspect of it. And so I really enjoyed that CNN clip there that kind of is an antidote to all those Fox News clips of the people who are thanking God for saving them from the tornado. There's an atheist, and I that was kind of a brave thing to do on national TV, to say that you're an atheist, which, especially in Oklahoma, I guess there are atheists in Oklahoma, I'm glad to see. Anyway, so after that bonus clip there that I hope everybody enjoyed, I'm going to get to the questions. I think I actually had 8 questions posted prior to the show. One was or a couple of them were right before the start of the show today, but 6 of them came during the week, and I wanted to answer those. The first question comes from Nate's Lovebugs, asks, you keep saying that a constitutional amendment is not the only way to help solve the corruption money has caused in government. Can you elaborate on that? Mind you, my field of expertise is chemistry and not law. And you'll notice Aaron Political is posted under there. We've been asking him to make a video on that for weeks now, and he's been saying he would for those same weeks. It's very frustrating. I trust in his intellect, but this makes me suspect his opinion is not based on logic and facts, but instead emotion or bias. Well, I'm not sure why anyone would come to that conclusion. Basically, one of the reasons I'm thinking of cutting down on Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live is because I only have so much time every week to put to making videos, and I think maybe I should spend more of it on making videos and less of it on this live show if it's not as popular. And, you know, like this week, there were like 4 different videos I was thinking of making. One of them was that video that I am going to make eventually, that'll be titled something like Constitutional Amendment Required to Fix corruption of money in politics, something like that. And I will make that video. But when I'm looking at the possible videos that I can spend my time on making during the week, one of the things I look at is the video on a current event? Is it something that's topical? And is it something that if I don't make the video now, it's going to go away? And this campaign finance video, there's not going to be a constitutional amendment anytime soon. There's not going to be an end to the corrupting influence of money in politics anytime soon. So I know I'm going to be able to make that video sometime when I can't find another video to make. The video I'm working on now, I don't post the announcement that I'm making the video until I have all the clips cut, and I have about half the clips cut for this video, but it's about whether students should be suspended from school for willful defiance, and that's a very topical issue here in California. It's not a national issue so much, although it's using some clips from the Bill O'Reilly show last Friday. So about the constitutional amendment, I will be making a video about that. It is kind of a complicated issue, so I don't want to spend the rest of my half hour or so of Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live answering that question, but I did want to answer those two comments together, both from Nate's Lovebug and from Aaron Political, about my campaign finance video, which I will make. So let me move on to the second question I got over the week here is Bob Willoughby, who posted a bunch of questions on the last Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live comment section after it was recorded and posted. And he asked, question, did the President of the United States lie to the American people about the deaths of 4 Americans in Benghazi? This is a simple question. A yes or no will be sufficient. Thank you. And then he goes on and says some other stuff. Well, I mean, for a simple answer to that question, as far as I know, I haven't seen any quote from President Obama in which he intentionally said something that was false with the purpose to mislead people. That's my definition of a lie. That's, the definition of a lie that's in the dictionary. So I don't think that President Obama has lied about Benghazi, at least not from any of the quotes that I've seen, but I always keep an open mind on such things, and I certainly don't put it past President Obama or any politician to say something that's dishonest. So if someone can show me a quote of something that he said that he knew to be false at the time, and he meant to mislead people by saying it, then I would change my answer. But I guess that is a little bit longer than a yes or no answer, but the answer is no for for the reason I've explained. Let me get rid of, unfortunately, this Wirecast software that I use for these live shows. They only take 3. You can only put 3 pieces of media on there at a time, and so if I want to, I had a video and 2 questions, and that took all of the 3 spaces, and so now I want to add the next 3 questions. That's the clicking you hear, and I apologize for that. See, 3 questions 3, 4, and 5 here. The question 3 during the week. So this is a really long question. I don't know if you can read all that. I can't read it on the screen that I have, but he's asking about the Second Amendment, and he says, given that the past Supreme Court cases on the Second Amendment, how can the assault weapons ban and magazine restriction be constitutional? I'm not arguing that the Second Amendment is absolute. It clearly isn't, and I will present some cases to support what I am talking about. United States versus Miller, 1939, quite clearly it states that we should be allowed to have firearms similar to that of the current military of the day. Well, see, that's as far as I have to go to where it says United States versus Miller, 1938, quite clearly states that we should be allowed to have firearms similar to that current of the military of the day. That is not an accurate statement of what the Miller case says. In fact, I don't think the Miller case says much clearly at all, and so I don't even need to go further than that to answer that question, because the two recent Supreme Court cases, the reason the whole individual right to bear arms was up for discussion is because that Miller case was completely ambiguous. I mean, I went through and I reread it before I answered this question, and it doesn't say what you said. It says something like, I mean, I'd have to go back and read it again, but it doesn't clearly state anything about what arms are protected by the Second Amendment. It says that the gun that was prohibited in that case couldn't be part of the arms that were protected by the militia or something like that, but it never says what is or what should be or even that that's important. It just says that in a kind of vague way, and much of that decision is pretty vague and it's ambiguous. I used to debate the Miller I used to debate the Second Amendment on the ACLU message boards back before the more recent Supreme Court cases. And the thing about the Miller decision is that it can be interpreted either way by both sides. Now, the more recent Supreme Court decisions say that all they've upheld so far is an individual right to bear arms for self-defense in the home. But they've never said anything about assault weapons or what kinds of weapons, assault weapons, or whether you consider that to be automatic or semi-automatic. I see that argument going on in my video comment section all the time, but or not all the time, but continuing to go on in some of my I have a video gun control or God control where there continues to be a discussion about this issue, and the more recent Supreme Court decisions that found an individual right did not specifically say what kinds of arms were protected or even how extensive the right was beyond the right to self-defense in the home. Nothing about whether you could carry it outside the home or what kind of weapons, and even specifically says that that's going to be up to future Supreme Court cases. So the premise of that question is not correct, and that is why it's still an open question as to whether the magazine, whether magazine restrictions and assault weapons bans are constitutional. It may be, it may not be. It's not decided by previous Supreme Court decisions. Also, the Perpich decision you mentioned there, I've read that, and it doesn't really answer the question. So, moving on to the next question here for Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live, I have a question from Goat Udder. I'm having little problems reading it. Let me see if it comes a little clearer when I open this window up. It says, I'll try one last time here. Given the state of our society today, do you believe any rational basis exists for prohibiting prostitution? And do you believe the prohibition of prostitution is consistent with the right of privacy or the religion clauses of the First Amendment? Thank you. Okay, so notice how it says, do you believe any rational basis exists for prohibiting prostitution? That is that raises a red flag in the way you ask the question for me as a lawyer, because I'm sorry, I was just taking a little Marco Rubio drink there. So the reason that the rational basis phrase raises a difficulty is because when you're talking about people's constitutional rights, there are different levels of scrutiny, and the lowest level of scrutiny for rights that aren't very important, like laws of general application that don't have an intent to discriminate, that's like equal protection. I know I'm like losing a whole bunch of people when I'm talking about this, but the rational basis review of a law just says, could any reasonable person believe that there is a good reason for passing this law? And for prostitution, I think prostitution could probably pass rational basis review, because a legislator could believe, prohibiting prostitution, stops the spread of disease. That's not actually true. I think that when prostitution is legal, it makes it easier to stop disease. But a legislator could believe that, and so it would pass rational basis review, or that prostitution costs the state money for some reason. Any kind of even vague reason would pass rational basis review. Now, I personally believe that it violates more than that there is a fundamental right involved I've said this on previous live event shows that I think that everyone should have a fundamental right to control their own body, as long as you're not hurting some third party. You know, what consenting adults do with their own bodies, as long as they're, mentally competent adults and they're consenting, it shouldn't be the government's, shouldn't be the role of the government to interfere in that at all. And if it is a right to privacy, the right to privacy is a fundamental right, and that's not rational basis review under the law. That's something where the state, if they're violating a fundamental right, they have to prove that they are that the law that is restricting that fundamental right is narrowly tailored to further a compelling state interest, and that's a much stricter kind of scrutiny. And I don't think that prostitution would pass that level of scrutiny. Unfortunately, courts have not upheld that laws that prohibit prostitution violate a right to privacy, and there's a lot of difficulty in getting that kind of consensus in the law, especially given that there were laws against prostitution at the time that the Constitution... I'm sorry, I'm getting a little distracted by my dog snoring here. Hold on. Wake up. Wake up, Sandy. Don't snore. Sorry about that. Because prostitution was illegal at the time the Constitution was ratified, I think, at least for those people who believe in original intent or that kind of thing, it's going to be difficult to convince those judges that prostitution violates some constitutional right, because the people who ratified the Constitution apparently didn't think it was unconstitutional, or at least if you believe in that kind of reasoning. So personally, if I were to decide the scope of the right to privacy, I think it would include anything that mentally competent consenting adults decide to do with their own bodies, but that's not where the courts have found the scope of the right to privacy. Okay, so moving on to the next question here. It's from Terry Alther. Question for Wednesday: what are your thoughts on the ruling of the Romaki case? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Should they be allowed to stay? And it's about these homeschoolers from Germany, and this was a question on an earlier live event. These homeschoolers from Germany, they're Christians who lived in Germany and wanted to homeschool their kids, but there's a law in Germany that says you have to send your kids to the public schools. And so they came to the United States and they're asking for asylum, saying their religious liberty is being violated by the compulsory education laws in Germany. And I actually read the latest order in that case. Here, let me see. I think I actually have a picture of that here somewhere. Yeah, the latest order here is it's from the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's Romaki versus Holder. And I read through this, and basically the reason, what they said in there, and this is what I said last time, there's this Wisconsin versus Yoder case, Supreme Court case in the United States, that says that in the United States, American parents have a right to religious liberty, at least these Amish people in Pennsylvania didn't have to send their kids to the public school past the age of 16 because of their religious beliefs. And the Supreme Court said that was covered by their parental rights and their religious liberty under the First Amendment. But what this court said is just because we believe that in the United States doesn't mean that you're persecuted in another country if that country doesn't believe what we believe here, especially if it's what's called a law of general applicability, which, as I mentioned earlier, that means the compulsory education laws in Germany don't just say religious parents have to send their kids to school. It says everyone has to send their kids to school, and there's no, special prosecution just for religious people. That's another issue. So if there's no special prosecution and it's a law of general applicability, then just because the law is different in Germany than it is here doesn't mean that their rights are being violated such that they can't be deported or that they get asylum. So, and that is based on prior precedent, and that makes sense to me. it's kind of an interesting issue as to how much persecution should grant someone asylum, but that's not really a constitutional issue. It's more a statutory issue because Congress makes the laws as to what qualifies for asylum and what doesn't. And I don't know, I mean, is it really that much of a persecution for these Christian parents to have to send their kids to German public schools? I'm not sure that it is, but I don't know. You can tell me what you think in the comments here. Now I'm going to, I have a few more questions here before I get to the live questions. I don't know why my dog is whining so much. She's usually just sits there and guards the door for Liberal Viewer Wednesday here. So that was question 5. I've got question 6 and let me just add these questions real quick. Sorry, I have to do all the technical things while also being the performer here. So got question 6 and 7 loaded up. So question 6 here is from Leroy Johnson. Question for Wednesday: do you think the sequestration cuts are going to just be made permanent, as the only noise heard about it was quickly quieted down and there seems to be no move to make changes to it? Well, I used to be kind of more confident that sequestration was going to be ended by some grand bargain where the president and the Congress would get together and come up with some big budget deal that would cut entitlements somewhat. You know, they talk about this change CPI, where they slow the growth of Medicare by changing the way they calculate the increase for inflation, and that the president and the Democrats would make a deal with the Republicans that they would go along with that as long as Republicans, you know, raised taxes a little more or came up with some sort of tax reform that closed loopholes and you know, made the rich pay a little more. And so I thought there was going to be a deal. If you'd asked me like 10 days ago, I mean, that's what would undo the sequestration. But now with all these scandals and the Congress getting more polarized, it looks like a deal on anything, except for maybe immigration, is going to be less and less likely. So I'd start to say now maybe there isn't going to be some deal that gets rid of sequestration unless it starts really, you know, there are much more visible ways that it's hurting people who aren't poor people who nobody seems to care about, which is where the brunt of sequestration is really biting right now. You know, they got rid of the flight delays from the air traffic controller problems and the TSA problems. So it seems like all the ways that sequestration is really hurting people is people that nobody cares about. And now that there's so less likelihood of any kind of bipartisan solution and any kind of grand bargain, then I'd say no. Sequestration is probably not going to get solved. But of course, I was wrong before, so maybe I'll be wrong again. Next question before I get to the live questions. I've got 2 more questions. One comes from, or actually they both come from Gemma Tomlinson, who's one of my viewers in Great Britain, who has helped get me some more viewers over in Great Britain, I think. So I'm happy to take a question from her, or even 2. The first one is, Liberal Viewer would love to hear your thoughts on the unfolding story today in London, particularly the surge in popularity of extreme right groups like the English Defence League, which is inevitable but perhaps helped by the mass media coverage. Would be pretty interested to see how the story has been reported in the States. Well, for those who don't know, there was this terrible attack in London today where 2 people, I think they were sort of homegrown British Muslims, attacked this guy who turned out to be a soldier. He was in like some Help the Veterans t-shirt, and they attacked him with like meat cleavers, and it was really nasty. Because afterwards, like, there's this video of this one bloody guy. Here, I'll show you. I haven't seen that much coverage of it here in the United States. I mean, that doesn't mean it hasn't been covered, but just that what I watched, I saw this CNN story that you can see here: brutal fatal cleaver assault in London called a terrorist attack. And you can see they show the video, the ITV video of one of the attackers apparently with bloody hands and a meat cleaver, you know, saying, "I'm sorry that women had to see this, but women in Muslim countries have to see this all the time." And I mean, it's pretty horrendous. And I also read some further things that there was a follow-up attack. Someone put some sort of smoke bomb or grenade into a mosque somewhere in Great Britain as a sort of a retaliation. And I know there are a lot of right-wing groups in Great Britain, like the English Defence League. You know, some analyses I had read in the past talked about how Great Britain, especially, and Europe more generally, were more susceptible to these kind of homegrown Muslim terrorist acts than the United States, because Muslims in Europe tend to be more isolated and ghettoized, and the United States is more of a pluralistic society with more tolerance of religious diversity. I mean, because of our First Amendment, and you know, and I guess in Britain there's a Church of England. In a previous live event, by the way, I said there was a official religion in France, so I was totally wrong about that. That hasn't been true since like the Third French Republic, and I apologize for that. But and I don't know if there's more religious pluralism in the United States, but I do think that at least before 9/11, Muslims were more ghettoized in Britain and more isolated, and that led to making it easier for those Muslims to be radicalized. But you know, more recently, our Boston bombing here, it looks like we are getting our own homegrown radicalized Muslims. I mean, they weren't native born, but they had lived here for a long time, and maybe since 9/11 we have isolated Muslims in the United States more. You know, Tamerlan Tsarnaev said that he didn't have any American friends, and I think that may be one of the reasons that he was radicalized. So I don't know. Now, you notice the coverage here that I showed from CNN said called a terrorist attack, which seems to be an important fact here in the United States, whether these attacks are terrorist attacks. And you know, about the rise of the right-wing groups like the English Defence League. I mean, I think that also, I've talked in previous LiberalViewer live events about how I think that the United States is less susceptible to the extremes, partly because of the way we don't have like a parliamentary system where smaller groups can have members of parliament, and I also think that the U.S. political system tends to make people more centrist, but that's just elected people. I mean, we do have our splinter groups too, and we do have our weird right-wing groups here in the United States. But I did want to comment on the fact that here the coverage in the United States has been about whether we call it a terrorist attack or not, and that kind of leads into Gemma Tomlinson's second question, which I'm just loading up here, which was LiberalViewer, and this is upside down, you got to read it from bottom to top. Also, maybe the difficult definition of terrorism versus other crime is coercion necessary, and does the word terrorist now essentially mean Muslim extremists for most people in the USA, UK? Well, you know, I've actually made a couple videos on this topic. One was like 5 years ago. I put this like quick question for the war on terrorism question for CNN YouTube Republican debate, where I made this 30-second video that they were going to ask people if they wanted to ask questions of Republicans, and they didn't use my video, but mine was about whether it gave a definition of terrorism as a tactic of using violence against non-combatants to achieve political objectives. And, you know, that's one of the things in this London attack, whether it would qualify as terrorism because the person attacked was a soldier. He was an off-duty soldier, so it's kind of ambiguous as to whether he's a non-combatant. And I actually made a video on that topic, too, when we had this Fort Hood shooter attack. I said terrorism targets civilians or the state, because we had a shooter at a military base here, and some of those people were civilians and some were off-duty, but it was a military base. And even in my previous video, I questioned whether attacking the Pentagon qualified as a terrorism, because that's not really a civilian target. And it depends on, you know, the definition. And one of the things I mentioned in that video, that second video, is I was kind of surprised that we have this whole war on terrorism, and people talk about terrorism all the time, but no one really is very rigorous about trying to define what terrorism means. And one problem I think that leads to is, you know, with this whole Benghazi thing about whether President Obama called it an act of terror. You know, he called what happened an act of terror in the Rose Garden and in this other speech within a day, but then in the 60 Minutes interview that wasn't aired till after the election, or a clip of it. He was asked about it, and he's whether it was terrorism. He said, "Well, we're still trying to find out who did it." And I think that's what Gemma was asking at the end of that question about. We get kind of confused about whether terrorism refers to the act or the people. And I think President Obama in that answer was talking about, do we know who the people were who did the Benghazi attack? Were they terrorists or not? These Muslim extremists, and that's what they were still trying to find out, even though there was some intelligence on that. But he wasn't talking about whether it was an act of terrorism, but whether it was an act done by terrorists. And that's another ambiguity that I really dislike the whole war on terror, and the term war on terror, because it's so vague, and it's a war on a tactic. And I discussed that in those 2 videos that when this is recorded and put up on YouTube, hopefully I'll have a chance to go back and put in links to those videos. So I have a bunch of comments here from people who have been watching me live, and I just over half an hour here, but I did want to take some live comments, even though I don't have that much time left. But I see lots of people liked my CNN Wolf Blitzer atheism clip. Ken Fraser said that was awesome. Bentis says a great clip. It was awesome. Okay. Etc. Junior W Polo 1087 asks, how do you feel about the recent killing of another Boston bombing suspect by the FBI in Florida? Whatever happened to cops shooting a guy one time in the leg to be able to subdue, then get his story out? Well, that was a very strange story. I mean, when I first heard that story, I was thinking, when I used to be a public defender, I had a lot of interviews with people that got confrontational, but that was an interview that got really confrontational, where the cop took out his gun and shot the person. I mean, I will wait to find more facts on that, but that almost sounds like it could have been suicide by cop, or I don't want to speculate, but I don't understand how an interview turns into one person being dead. And shooting in the leg, actually, I don't think cops are really, when they draw their gun, they're trained to shoot to kill. I don't think anyone tries to shoot anyone in the leg. They have non-lethal means, but I think if they get to the point where they've drawn their gun, it's very rare that they actually try to shoot someone in the leg. Let me see. Bentahurst says, Marco Rubio drinks are great. Keep it up. Okay, well, if I'm going to take another couple questions, then I will take a little drink here. Painful Masses question. Ignoring all the excess political aspects of the IRS scandal, do you think there are groups that can be legally targeted by the IRS as more likely to cheat on taxes? Well, yeah, the IRS audits people all the time based on these algorithms or ways that, if, you can target people who take a home office deduction because you think that's more likely to cheat on taxes. You can use all sorts of criteria. The problem here is they use criteria like Tea Party and people who are don't like the way the government's being run, and that's what's called viewpoint discrimination. If you target people based on their viewpoint on political issues, that's not whether they're more likely to cheat on their taxes. That's based. You can't say people with certain political viewpoints are more likely to cheat on taxes. Maybe that's what your question's getting at. They're like people who. The only political belief I could think of that you might be able to target is people who don't believe that they should have to pay federal income taxes. Maybe you might be able to justify targeting those people, but people who believe in less government or name their group after the Tea Party, which was a tax protest group. I don't know if you could really go that far. So let's see. The assault in London is on HuffPo too, says Phoenix Writer. Okay, I'm sure it's on a bunch of places. So I'm going to take one more. I'll take one more question here. That's EB Guy 93. Do you think they should abolish the Fed? Well, no. I I think that there is a good use for a central bank. I think the Fed should, be more transparent. The people who want to audit the Fed, I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. I think people should be able to see what's going on. But, I talked in a previous live event and sort of briefly in my recent video about whether right-wing austerity economics based on a spreadsheet error, that video that I made. I talked about what government can do when there's a depression or a recession to try to stimulate economic growth. They can spend money. They can, on like public works project, they can cut taxes. And then the other thing government can do is if there's a central bank, that's what the Federal Reserve is. It's kind of a quasi-independent central bank that prints our money and sets interest rates that are overnight loans for banks. And so by quantitative easing and lowering interest rates, the central bank can stimulate economic growth and also curb inflation by doing the opposite. That's an important lever of power. And one of the reasons that one of the problems they have in the European Union right now, in the Eurozone, one of the reasons Greece has all the problems it has is because they don't have their own bank. They can't print their own currency. They can't, that's all. They have a centralized economic policy, but no sovereignty. I think that's why Europe is all messed up, because the European states can't print their own money like our Fed can, and that's an important tool for government to use when they're in a recession, for deficit spending. And it's not a long-term solution, but it is a short-term solution. So, and I think that our use of the central bank has helped get rid of some of the worst ups and downs of the business cycle. And so that, I guess, I know that there are a lot of conspiracy theorists about the Federal Reserve and central banks, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people, libertarian, right-wing people, who are very insulted by what I just said. But anyway, that's my answer to that question. And so I'm going to be doing LiberalViewer Wednesday Live here at 4:30 p.m. Pacific for at least a couple more weeks, depending on how popular it is. But, I don't mind if I'm talking to fewer people. I kind of enjoy doing it. I may want to use some of that time to spend a little more on making my produced videos, so I may be cutting it down to less than weekly, but I don't know. We'll see how that goes, but I appreciate all of you for joining me. I'm glad to see I had some good live viewers and some good questions during the week, and some good live questions. I'll see you all on Sunday, I hope, at 6:30 p.m. Pacific for my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup. And like I said, I am making a produced video. I haven't quite announced it because I don't have all the clips cut, but it's about whether students should be suspended for willful defiance. And it's a Fox News bias video, and also having to do with this California legislation. So I hope you all check that out when it's up, hopefully in the next couple days, and hope you have a good rest of your week.